Well, tonight is Tuesday, June 8th at 6:08 p.m. We'll call the Curriculum and Ed Planning Committee to order. Let the note show that members Rodriguez, Bondo, and myself are present. And we'll start with the approval of the meeting minutes and then turn it over to Malia. So first of all, is there a motion to approve the meeting minutes from May 11th?
I'll move.
Thank you. And a second?
Second.
Great. Seconded by Member Rodriguez. Any questions or comments on the notes? Okay. All in favor of approving the minutes? You can just indicate. Okay. Thank you for those incredibly thorough notes, Lindsay. I was commenting on the level of detail that you captured during a historic conversation on equity policy in particular, and I really appreciated that. So I'll turn it over to Malia, and we'll have our
great
meeting. Thank you.
Perfect. So I'm going to kind of be sharing screen and getting off screen, but just wanted to kind of ground in the objectives for this evening. So we want to just discuss and recommend any final edits to the equity policy in anticipation of the vote at the next meeting. Per the workshop, there was some discussion, some questions. So Barrett and I just wanted to check in and make sure, did anybody want to make any final revisions before we have the vote next Tuesday? So we'll take a little bit of time on that. Then we have some very hot off the presses implementation data of our K through 8 with a 9th grade pilot illustrative math curriculum. And so Jesse's here to step you through some of the insights from that and the data that we have collected, which we're super excited to share with you tonight. And then finally, we wanted to preview the district-wide teaching and learning priorities for next year. This is grounded in the long-term plan that Adam and I had talked about for this year for Curriculum Committee, ending the year with kind of looking at how are we thinking about what happened this year and how that sets us up for our approach to next year. So we thought previewing the priorities would be a good way to create some transparency into how we're thinking about where we want to pick things up in the fall. And so we'll talk a little bit about that, the rationale, point out some of the research we lean on in our approach, and then just give you all some opportunity for feedback and conversation about that. I did put on here at the very end, potentially just a very quick preview of fall topics, but I'm not sure we'll have time for that given the substantive conversations we want to have this evening. So I would assume, Adam, you and I will connect on that offline and do like we did this last time, give our team a kind of 6-month long-term plan for September through December. Okay. And we'll do the same thing, like, based on what we know and the input you all have given before, make a proposal and then get feedback before we land our plan. Okay. Great. So any questions on the objectives and the agenda for tonight before we hop in? Okay. So I'm going to go off screen share. We linked the policy into the document here. So same thing that we looked at the last meeting. Oh, sorry. Is there a chat in here? Oh, okay. Thanks. So I think a couple things I just wanted to surface. One, Emily had asked a handful of questions about the framing and just language choices. I think the theme of her feedback was being even more direct and explicit in a few places about expectations and accountability. So just wanted to hear if this committee wanted to change anything based on where she was coming from in her questions/feedback. And then check if anyone heard anything else that sparked a thought for you about wanting to make edits. And then I will share too. I can do it either now or after we talk through board member feedback and questions. But I do have a teeny bit of feedback from the Living Contract Committee, which is the PEA and district team that works together. And so I wanted to share that with you all before we, finalize for next week. So do you want to talk through Emily's feedback and anything else you all heard and see if there's anything? Okay. So maybe, let's start with Emily since I already put that one out there. Did anybody, based on her questions and suggestions, want to recommend we make any edits to language? I don't know if I'm calling. Are we for Adam? Do you have to call on Roberto? Or
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. I had the other screen up looking through the policy. Roberto, go ahead, please.
And we, just so that I remember, like you said a moment ago, Emily wanted just there to be a more clear way for us to have accountability of the superintendent. Can you just refresh our memory? Did she have any examples of how that accountability could be carried out, or what would make the accountability something that'll be more, I guess, accessible for the board to use, as opposed to just this ideal of accountability?
I mean, I'll share, but then you guys should jump in. And Barrett, I don't know if you have notes from that night from the very specific place Emily was making her comments. But I felt like I was hearing from her some like really precise places where she had language that she would have been more direct on. So I can pull up my notes here, more than like a general added bullet or section. That was what I heard.
Yeah, I think I'm missing some of my notes. I must have left them at work, but because I have page 1, where she had a couple of word suggestions. I don't know if you have that, Malia. I can always go back to the recording to grab it. But yeah, that's the one thing that was on my mind from her comments.
But something then, if I can jump on that, is that I think I was leaning a little bit on what she was mentioned, and on the PD, on the professional development, I think she was asking about on the expectation. I mean, expected if we can go with the requirement. I mean, so people, they can see the value behind, because I just going, like we said, some other teacher, if it's not required, they may not see the value to go attend. So I think that's exactly what came out to my mind when she was mentioned about required instead of expected.
Mickey, thank you for reminding that. I would just add on to that. That's under staff and capacity building, professional development. You're right. She said required instead of expected. And then she also said down in staff evaluation, evaluation tools and processes, she was having a feeling like should incorporate was not as direct either. So that was a place where, a suggestion was potentially like will incorporate, or something that she felt was more strong and assertive in the language itself.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'll share from my perspective. I don't feel like those word differences from an implementation perspective will, I feel like they're different. You could say they're stronger ways of communicating the same thing. So I really feel like accountability of this comes down to like the way in which the superintendent holds the team accountable and you all hold him accountable. But I would say for you all, if you want it to sound more top down, or like, have that strong language, that's a tone choice on your part.
Go ahead, Roberto.
So there's, for the board members to consider, there's a layer to this to be aware of. So as an approach, some boards are going to be more involved in these sorts of decisions with the superintendent, and other boards are going to be more hands-off and just delegate the superintendent tons of authority. So as a board, we need to decide whether we want to restrict or to really align what our relationship with the superintendent in terms of accountability is. Or do we want to leave it open so that future boards can then change that relationship between board and superintendent? And that in Portland Public Schools has changed over the years. We've had boards that have been very controlling of superintendents. We've had rotations of boards that have been more hands-off. And so we want to recognize that how we approach accountability also is going to limit or allow future boards. We're setting precedent, I guess is what I'm saying. And we've had, when we did a few years back, some of the board dynamic and engagement work, we did a lot of, we try to just work a lot on that. we did discuss the different approaches and the different models of board and superintendent relationships. And we looked at some of the national data around that and some studies that are very well known. I can't draw them right now from memory. But anyways, just to highlight that. And I think a lot of the current board members weren't around for that. But it was, for me, it was a really important moment on recognizing the relationship.
Thanks. For myself, just to clarify, we're kind of talking about two words right now, right? We're talking about all PPS staff are expected versus all PPS staff will participate. And then we're talking about evaluation tools and processes should incorporate versus will incorporate, right? Yeah. This is kind of arbitrary. Well, it's not. But for the B, with the evaluation tools and processes will incorporate, I feel like that's helpful to me. I don't know why it would be should. But the expected versus will participate, that's an interesting one. I'd be curious on more thoughts from the other members on that one, as well as different points of view on will incorporate in the B.
I have a question on the implementation. Are we going to have another language for the implementation stage, or as the implementation is going to look like? I mean, let me just rephrase that, because I know discrimination and harassment, we have implementation stage. I mean, a different area of implementation. So are we going to see the same thing for this policy, or just that one's going just to guide to the lens of equity to different policies? Or are we going to have some implementation on those different aspects? So
I mean, this might not be answering your question, Mickey, but I'll try based on what I think you're getting at. I think that, I mean, this policy as it's written now is intended to be the final policy that would be, voted on and approved without any additional implementation plan in the context of the board. Then we have our implementation plans, which is, our annual process of goal and priority setting with our action planning. And so this work already without this policy is very much guiding the choices we're making when it comes to curriculum and school culture and climate and those sorts of things. So I think the implementation plan would live separate from the policy.
Yeah, so in the area of expected or require, I think I'm comfortable with the language we have now, because it's really setting the bar to the high standard. Then, that's why we are expecting from the staff to be able to look at and to go to those different areas of building capacity to the lens of equity. And I think I like the language the way it is, because that's just the level of the standards. Then we're raising the bar really high. Then this is exactly what we intend. So everything we're doing, respecting, valued the culture, bringing everything under the curriculum. So I think going to the professional development, we really expect, we have a lot of expectation under the policy. Then they're going to see everything under the equity lens, so we can build a better culture in our public school system. So I'm comfortable with the language we have right now.
Okay.
I see that. This is me.
I mean, would it be, should we maybe tweak the should to will and then leave what we have? And then I don't know if Emily or others are going to want to make friendly amendments or amendments in general, but I'm also just, anyway, I want to give this the time, but I want to just monitor our time too, given the other topics.
Well, Amelia, you said that those changes wouldn't really have an impact on implementation. So, I'm sorry, is that accurate? Is that what you said? They wouldn't necessarily change the way that we're going to implement.
I mean, I do think that, as it's pointed out, I think will instead of should. I feel like that has a more substantial difference in meaning than expected versus required. So that's why I like that change also, because then that creates more accountability to all the evaluation systems. We need to be seeing that. So I like that change. I could see that making a difference when it comes down to like you all being able to ask the superintendent, like, where is this happening, or him or her being able to ask that of the head of HR, et cetera. But other things like expected and required, especially when it comes to PD, like I think our issue is not the difference in that word. I think it's the action we're taking if people aren't attending. Yeah.
I think that change accomplishes what you just said, Malia. I think it also accomplishes something along the axis that Member Rodriguez put forth in terms of that relationship between the board and the superintendent. That feels like the right place in that scale to me too.
Okay. Barrett, do you mind I mean, I know Lindsay's taking notes, but will you make that tweak? Do you mind doing that piece?
Got it.
Okay. Thanks.
I believe I'm in the version that is the Google Docs version of what is in the board docs currently from the board meeting. So I think I'm editing from that.
All right. We can do a triple check after because we had a little bit of edit version control moments.
Yeah, I think I got the right one, but so evaluation tools and processes will incorporate opportunities for reflection and feedback. That is the only change I've made thus far.
Great. Do you all want to hear me read the LCC feedback before we move forward? So just, I will own that part of our contract says that if we substantially change or create a new policy, we have to run it by the Living Contract Committee. I've only been doing, since I've been here, policy revisions, so I didn't know that. So Carrie was great to flag it for Javier and me during last meeting, and talked with Barb and agreed to let us email it out to the Living Contract Committee and request feedback that way. I think she understands that we had substantial educator feedback throughout the entire year-long process. But I do, just in the spirit of fulfilling that commitment from our contract, want to read to you all the feedback I did get. And this is from one of the educators on the committee. First, let me say that whoops, that was a joke thing. As far as the equity policy goes, I generally love it all. I just have two thoughts that I would share with you. The first is when it comes to the hiring policy, I absolutely agree the diversity of staff is of the utmost importance. Including staff with diverse cultural, linguistic, social, etc. backgrounds is good and important work. My only worry around this is the district would prioritize diversity over qualifications. I would personally like to see something about experience, maybe, or teach Portland and other things to ensure that we can get teachers who are diverse, but not at the expense of people who are qualified. Secondly, the following line is in the school environment section, climate and culture. The experience of being at a school is welcoming, inclusive, and emotionally safe for all. I'm wondering why this is specifically emotionally safe and not emotionally and physically safe. I know that I've had very frank and direct conversations with both of you about my experience at X school under X administrator. On a personal level, I would really like to make sure that there's something in there about feeling physically safe or safe from harm. Other than that, I really like it when I look across the country and see what's happening with equity work or critical race theory and other places. I'm deeply proud to be a part of this district and the good work we're doing. Thank you both. That was written to Barb Stoddard and myself. So I just wanted you to hear that feedback and see if that sparked anything for anybody here in terms of revisions or, yeah.
So I'm sorry, can I jump in? So I think it's a legitimate question. How do we, through an HR point of view, what, I don't want to use the word explain, but what is the, in the equity hiring toolkit, where do we reconcile, the goal of having that diverse staff, and the goal is not just to have diverse staff, but have the most qualified and diverse staff. So how do we answer that question? What is the,
Yeah, I mean, to me, that's an easy one. So one of the cornerstones of our equity hiring toolkit is to use a competency-based approach. And this helps manage against bias in the interview process. And so we clearly define the competencies we're looking for in a role. And then we design interview scripts and tasks that help us get evidence of the extent to which the candidate has those competencies. So as an example, as a hiring manager in the district, I recall more than once where I've had, we have teams, and where I have had a team where we've kind of done the interviews and collected our evidence. So by every question or task, how did you rate them as it pertains to this competency, et cetera? And I've observed in conversations where people have strongly advocated for somebody where the data did not match at all. And so they clearly had an affinity toward a particular candidate. And the types of things they said had to do with their preference, they felt comfortable with them, these sorts of things. And this wasn't necessarily with a candidate of color in a way, it was just like in general. And so as a hiring manager and using what we use, I said, but our data shows clearly that this candidate has sort of evidence of the competencies we are looking for. So that's, Roberto, an example of how the equity hiring toolkit is about really getting clear, what are you looking for, and how do you design a process that isn't about who you like, who fits, things like that, but who actually has the capacity to demonstrate the competencies. Another way that's helpful is when people talk about experience. And so oftentimes committees will choose somebody who's done something for 15 or 20 years without rigorous conversation about, well, do they actually have the skills and competencies, or do they have certain skills and competencies that are higher than the experienced candidate? They just got them in a different way. So it enables us to have that kind of debate and discussion and making hiring decisions. So I think our toolkit leads us towards the most qualified candidates based on what we need in the position.
And we've had the equity hiring toolkit now for a couple of years in place, and I want to say that it's evolved somehow. But how long have we been using it in its current structure, the way that you explained the process?
Did we roll out 2 years or 3 years, Barrett?
The first version was 2019, and Barb and I have just gone through kind of a revision, but it's more of a revision around making it useful for the end user. So we've moved around a lot of things. We've put more things in the appendix. We haven't changed the framework of it. We've just made it a little easier for people to find what they need, because a lot of it is about how do you effectively address bias in the hiring process? And so it's a lot of the research that supports that work is included in the toolkit too.
Yeah, and we've had at the board level, we've had discussions about the equity hiring toolkit. So, when we have the personnel items, sometimes I'll ask to bring it up just to remind us of it, right? So I guess what I'm trying to get at is, that's the answer, and I feel like the board has expressed really good support towards the equity hiring toolkit, and we see, as you said, that it's still evolving. So to me, that I feel really comfortable with that work. So in regards to the feedback that we received from the LCC. I feel comfortable leaning back on the equity hiring toolkit that we have in place, particularly acknowledging that the board has expressed support for it, and that it's quote unquote, I don't want to say it's a living document, but it seems the implementation and the way that we adapt the user end of it keeps evolving, so that we end up, like I said, with the most qualified candidates. Yeah, that's my answer. Sorry.
Okay. One just thought for you all that, and just because I under CI, the district recruits, hires, develops, and retains equity, literate, and linguistically diverse teachers and staff. It is notable, in my experience, because I have an HR background. Usually there is a talented and diverse staff, right? That's even in our Portland promise. So it's sort of we say talented, diverse, because it's both. So that could be something we just add talented before all of those other things. But again, per your comment, I don't know, whatever you guys think, but I'm just noticing we say talented, diverse in Portland Promise, and we don't have it here.
Bondo, any comments related to this hiring piece?
I don't have a lot because I think I'm leaning what Mr. Rodriguez just mentioned is that, but the only observation that I look at here, and I try to read people's mind, because when we look at the value of our educator, I think that's what we're looking for. Is already the high qualified. So it's not because we try to make it more equitable, then we just need to emphasize that it's not just to diversify, to build on the diversity, but in our target is that we need to have more qualified, but we're already getting all our high qualified teachers. So I think we just need to work on the diversity to make sure then we have a good representation on the diverse educator, but the value behind the quality is never be a doubt. So that's just what I want to emphasize. And for the other part, I think when you mentioned about physical save, I think we are building already under the culture. And I think when you see on the professional development, when we try to embrace different culture, that's exactly when we start value the safetyness for each person and each student and the staff among the schools. So I'm not really comfortable to add any physical, because I feel already then is under the promise. The Portland Promise and under the value, then each student and staff need to feel secure or safe in our school district. I don't know if we have to put that one under the equity policy. I don't feel so. I don't think so, in my opinion.
Thank you, Member Bondo. On the this hiring one, I was in line with where you were, Malia, with just whether it's recruits, hires, develops, and retains qualified or talented, or qualifying the equity hiring toolkit as something that does more than just understanding and mitigating bias, because I was hearing you describe it that way. I think in either place, whatever way you wanted to capture that is the truth. It's what we do. So might as well say it.
Can I make one last comment on that? Because I was like debating about my thought and like where you were coming out, Roberto, and I think in some ways by adding that in, to your point, Adam, it is the truth. And I wouldn't want people to read this and then feel like they can say, oh, we're just trying to find diverse staff regardless of qualification, because it is not the case that that's what we're doing. We're looking for the best, most diverse team we can get. And that's what our practices align towards. So hearing you say that, Adam, because I was like, I don't know what I think, makes me actually want to add that in to make that be transparent for anyone who might question that this would somehow potentially undermine our ability to have the most qualified team.
It sounds we're on the same page. And I'll just say that, hearing a question raises the need for further education about this work, because the fact that was equivocated kind of as what would happen is of course rooted in some problems. But I think we can say it without it being about catering to that problematic perspective.
Can I jump on something? And I think what we need to look at, what we look at on the equity lens is that how we try to hire diversity and then retaining the diverse educator into our system. So that means is about all the change of culture. So that means what we're building under there. That's exactly what we've been missing, and that's why we have that equity. I mean, when we go into the hiring process, people need to see how we value the diversity in our education system, and how we bringing some educators, and how we maintain them, how we make sure that they stay in our system. because the thing is about other culture than bias and everything that we want to remove, and then start getting people from the mindset and changing a mindset for more an equity lens where everybody and the diversity of educator can feel really welcoming into our public school system. So that means is about the quality, and is also, and we retain the BIPOC educator into our system. That's why we need to look at the equity, because it's really speak a lot. They don't stay because they don't feel like they've been valued. So that's why we have the equity, because we want that representation to be built under that policy. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Member Rodriguez.
I just wanted to say, when Adam mentioned that just the fact that the question is raised kind of makes you think. That's kind of why I asked how long has the equity hiring toolkit been around, almost like trying to connect, has it been around long enough for people to be aware of the process and then to further even understand the process? So is there a way that maybe we need to do a parent U on the equity hiring toolkit? Or you know what I mean? I mean that as in maybe we need to talk more about it. And to Adam's point, maybe the question is being raised because people don't know.
Yeah, I would say we've used it with hiring managers. So this is a teacher, and so they may or may not have been on the hiring committee. I would also say that it's still early, so I know for a fact that the implementation and the sort of authentic use of all that's intended is not yet consistent across hiring teams and managers. Yeah. I'm looking at our time. So I just want to make sure I'm clear on make that sort of slight tweak.
I can just read you what I worked on that. So I'm under C2 related to the toolkit. So the district uses and maintains the equity hiring toolkit, a PPS resource designed to hire talented and qualified staff while understanding and mitigating bias in the hiring process. Does that feel like it gets at that? And then I am not adding physically and emotionally safe to the school environment, or I am?
Member Bondo said no desire for change there. I would just say we could just strike emotionally, and it could just be safe. And then I'll look to Member Rodriguez for his comment before we move on.
I'm sorry, I couldn't, my connection was getting bad. So we're talking about striking out.
So for CB, that might be a little awkward. It's climate and culture. The experience of being at school is welcoming, inclusive, and safe for all. So that it implies all of the types of safety.
Yeah,
that's good.
I see.
There we go.
I'm okay. Yeah, I'm okay with that change.
Okay. Great. So then are we good in terms of just a couple slight tweaks there? And I'll make sure Tuesday when, I say I won't have many remarks, but I'll probably just explain, here's where it is. I'll make the comment about these couple tweaks we made and where they came from. Okay, excellent. And Barrett, can you make sure those are good and final in the document, and then share it with Ann and Lindsay to put up in board docs Thursday this week, so the true and final accurate one is there.
Of course.
Okay. Thank you. Awesome. So Barrett, I don't know if you're going to stay or leave, but.
No, I'm not, but enjoy this. I think you'll be excited about this next bit.
Thanks, Barrett.
Thanks, Barrett.
Hello, everyone.
All right. So, great. So we're going to keep rolling. And next, we want to talk you through these illustrative math insights. So just, I guess you're going to mostly frame why we chose IM, right, Jesse? That was a part of what you're doing. Okay. So I'm going to stop talking and hand it over to Jesse, our Director of Curriculum Assessment and Instruction.
Awesome. Thank you. Hi, everybody. Really excited to talk to you about this today. So I'm going to share my screen. So we embarked on a research project this year about our implementation in IM. And so I just wanted to start by sort of grounding us in illustrative math and sort of, what this curriculum is. And, feel free to jump in at any point if you have questions or comments. But so reminder, Illustrative Mathematics is a high quality math curriculum. It's rated all green in Ed Reports, which is a great resource that analyzes curriculum to be high quality for various criteria. It's also written by educators from across the country and is really grounded in research. Another piece of it is that it's aligned to our vision. So their motto is that all students learn, enjoy, and use mathematics. And you'll notice that that's very similar to our vision for instruction for math. It's accessible for all students. So in every lesson, and actually almost in every activity in every lesson, there's a low floor, high ceiling task where all students have some sort of access point. And I'll show you one of those later on in the presentation. It's also very student centered. So the whole sort of structure of it is launch, explore, synthesize, as opposed to like I do, we do, you do. And launch, explore, synthesize really works under the assumption that students are coming to us with ideas, with knowledge, and that through working together and problem solving, that they come to understanding on their own and with their peers. And then lastly, it's specifically designed with high leverage practices for English language learners. And so there's all these routines that are called language routines that support the language development of students. So we love illustrative mathematics. We think it is really aligned to, what we're trying to do in terms of math. So how many years are we into IM at this point? So K through 5th grade, just to recall, they did a alpha pilot 2 years ago where some teachers opted in to doing the curriculum. And then last year was the beta pilot. So again, this is the very beginning stages of IM even having an elementary curriculum. And so this year was the first year that all teachers did IM. And this, again, as you know, this was a hybrid instruction year. So, students only had instruction in person 2 days a week. For 6th and 8th grade, we're in our 3rd year of implementations of all teachers, and again, hybrid instruction most of this year. And then for Deering, this year was the first year with the algebra pilot for 9th grade. Most of the year was remote, and next year, they liked it so much that they're going to be using it for Algebra 1, Geometry, and Algebra 2. Okay, so we did this research project. We partnered with IM. They have like a research arm of their program. They're a nonprofit and they're dedicated to student achievement and student learning. And so part of what they do is partner with districts to sort of support implementation along the way. We offered it up to our coaches, and 5 of them opted in to do this work with us. And the purpose was sort of threefold. One was to give the coaches some real-time data so that they could adjust their support for teachers along the way, to share successes of what's working and what, make sure that teachers understand that they're having an impact through this important work, which, is significant in terms of their time. And then lastly, to really think about, our implementation process for next year. We knew that this year was going to be, a little different, wonky. And so next year, knowing that we're going to have 5 days of instruction, we want to really sort of hit the ground running. And the work that we did this year with this research is going to really inform that work. So, for example, we'll have goals, we'll have measures, we'll sort of figure out what is the right support for teachers in terms of professional development. So the tools of the research were around principal interviews. We did teacher focus groups. We did some classroom observations conducted by coaches. And then we did a teacher survey at the end of the year for all teachers that taught IM. So I'm going to walk you through some of the findings. So the first one is about our teacher survey. One of the big win is that we had 129 teachers and coaches who took the survey, which to me just tells me that they're invested and want to contribute. And then these are some of their the sort of strengths around implementation. So teachers reported that before only 35% of them used a problem-based curriculum, and now 78% of them are using a problem-based curriculum. And we see this as significant because, like we said, problem-based curriculum is really student-centered, where students are doing the mathematics, where you walk into a classroom and students are the ones talking, students are grappling, students are figuring it out, as opposed to the teacher telling them. And then the second piece, teachers reported that before they used IM, only 30% of them used math content routines, and now 90% of them are regularly using math content routines. So I don't know if you remember the beginning, I was talking about low floor, high ceiling tasks. That's really what a math content routine is. So I'm going to stop presenting and just have you look at this one for a second and actually ask you to chime in if you can. So which one of these numbers doesn't belong? And I can't see you, so you have to just speak up.
9.
Why?
So the other one is when you add the single digits, they add up to 7, except 9.
Thank you. Does anybody have a different one that doesn't belong?
I was going to say 9 because it's a single digit number.
That's a different reason why 9 doesn't belong.
16 for me, because it's the only even.
Thank you very much. Exactly. So
I believe Lindsay has an answer too.
Oh, Lindsay?
I would have said 43 because the rest are square, like 3, 4 times 4, 5 times 5.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So you'll notice that everybody had an access point. Everybody had something to contribute, and there's no right answer, right? All of them are right answers. And, I've seen like even more visual learners might say 25 doesn't belong because it doesn't have a number with an enclosed area. See that? So 9, 6, an enclosed area. So there's many, many access points. This is why we call it a low floor, high ceiling task. So we're excited about that data. All right, let me present again. So this is some more strengths. So changes in teacher practice as a result of using IM curriculum. Again, this is teacher reported, but they said that if they're above a certain percentage, that is significant. So the first one, 70% of teachers said, I'm better able to help students achieve tasks that are on grade level. And so Malia reminded me that the TNTP data from last year showed that only 50% of our teachers said that they could meet grade level standards. And so this is significantly higher than that data point, which is really exciting. Teachers also said, or 78% of teachers said, my students more frequently share their ideas in class, which again is that piece around being student-centered and developing language through mathematics and developing math through language. And then lastly, 85% said I'm better able to implement math content routines with my students, which was what we just saw, one of the math content routines.
Jessie, I just want to quickly chime in and say I'm very encouraged by the first data point here. So to Jessie's point, if people don't believe their students can meet high expectations, they probably won't. I think there's extensive research that talks about the power of high expectations. And so to me, that idea that our data last spring showed half of our teachers said they thought all of their students can meet grade level standards, which also meant that half of our teachers said that their students couldn't meet grade level standards. To see 70% of the teachers implementing this curriculum believe that they are better able to help all students achieve tasks on grade level is huge. And I think one of the things I've heard anecdotally from teachers is that this is a significantly more rigorous curriculum, and concerns in the very initial phases that it would be too hard for our kids. And so what's super cool is to see that it's raising the bar from a rigor perspective. And, you know, things like this, you see people are like, oh, wow, like kids are actually achieving. And I've heard so many teachers have that reflection of like, I was surprised by, blown away, et cetera, that my kids could do this work. So anyway, I just wanted to add that little
I have a quick question. How long are we using the IM curriculum in our school? 2 years?
I think that, Jesse, if you quickly pop back, we're in our third year. Well, you don't even have to. A third year for middle school, Mickey, and then our first year of implementation in elementary for everyone, and a pilot only in Deering.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. So I'm just wondering what they had before. Because when I see the survey, some of them, they didn't use 30%. Some of them, now they start using 90%. So what they had before we start having that?
We had 2 different curriculum. One was called Everyday Math, and one was called Envision Math. And so those were not problem-based curriculum. So those are kind of more of that I do, we do, you do approach. And that's a simplification. They cycled and they had, we had 2 different elementary curriculums, and schools picked which one they wanted.
Okay. All right.
And then we did not have curriculum at the middle school level. That was like all kind of teacher made or different things. I think they might have had books, Jesse. There might have been like some Trig, Glencoe, and things like that.
From what I heard, there was a purchase of books, but they arrived to the schools and were never opened. I think that was the story that I was told from some years back.
Okay, so that means if we had that, each teacher has his own way to teach the math, but going to the same expectation?
Yeah, that's the work we've been doing.
That's exactly what I got. My daughter, she got a good math teacher, and my son got a really worse math teacher. So it was just the way. That's the way. Just they've been teaching those kind of curriculum. Yes,
that's totally what we're trying. Like what we're saying is the Portland Promise should say that everybody gets a coherent and meaningful learning experience in terms of both what and how we teach. So it's not to say every teacher is exactly the same, but that's why we start with the content area visions to articulate, here's what we're trying to do in terms of the pedagogical approach, grounded in research. And that helps also guide which instructional materials we choose, right. So that there's a coherent experience for students.
Yeah, this is great. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, sorry, Jesse, keep rolling.
Okay, no, it's good. Okay, so this is from the principal interviews. I just wanted to share a really short clip from this video. So Shelby Danks is the lead IM researcher, and she was sharing some findings, and this is her talking about the principals in Portland.
There are a lot of really...
Oh, sorry. Oh, no. Maybe we should come back to it.
I'm going to give it one try, a refresh. It's really good. I
had it all queued up and everything. Okay.
Alrighty.
Yeah. Sorry.
Okay, but there are a lot of really awesome strengths that we detected, just in general. Number one, I have to say, we've been doing these types of studies for the last 2.5 years now, 2 years. And for the most part, principals really struggle to view themselves as instructional leaders, is what our typical observation is. They tend to defer instruction to the coach, and they tend to view themselves as more operations leaders. However, with Portland, it was uncanny. I don't know if you guys have been working on this, but it was so exciting that principals took complete responsibility for instruction. When I asked them, what is the vision for mathematics teaching and learning, they could articulate a vision, and get this, a lot of those visions were coherent across the district. It was incredible. So I was kind of blown away, actually. So I put that as strength number one.
Great. So
that was by design. Or yeah, there you go, Jesse.
Well, we have been working.
We have been working on that.
Yeah, there. So it was really exciting to see that come through in the research. We did not prep her on that or anything. So that was fun. And we shared this with principals, I know Carly shared it with the middle school principals, but we're going to be sharing it with everybody soon, and just giving them a big kudos for the work that they've done. So another strength came from the teacher focus groups, which was around pacing, which was really interesting because this year, you might imagine that our pacing would have been pretty off given the pandemic and sort of the challenges with instructional, in-person time. But this came through as a strength compared to other districts, which was really great. And I think I attribute this to, we did summer work groups in the summer with math teachers and really dug into the math and helped coaches helped teachers really understand sort of what is most important in the math. And so this really is sort of a shout out to all the coaches, and the fact that we have a math coach in every building is incredible, an incredible asset that really helps move this work forward. We also have a coach who helps facilitate collaboration between those coaches, and that's also really important in terms of the work that we do.
Jesse, you might want to present, sorry, just as you're going.
Oh, yeah, no problem. And then this next one are some quotes. So I'll just give you a minute to read these quotes. This is from K through 5. And then here are from 6 through 9, some quotes for 6 through 9. Great. And then I'll just end with some areas for opportunity, which is what they talked about in terms of our implementation. The first is ensuring that we have a focus on classroom walkthroughs to monitor implementation. And they have some really great tools that we can use that are aligned to the curriculum to help us do that. To consider a common approach to assessment, which we are doing through our assessment strategy work. And that came through the, teacher surveys and the teacher focus groups and all of it, that was something that we needed. And that we should continue to trust the curriculum and avoid pre-teaching. So this is something that often happens with teachers that have been teaching a more direct instruction curriculum where they don't trust the curriculum. And so they're like, oh no, fractions are coming up. I need to teach them how to, I need to teach them the algorithm first so that they can do this lesson, as opposed to really knowing how to facilitate the learning, which can be sometimes messy and requires them to let go of the control a little bit, but that ultimately leads to greater understanding and greater learning if you trust the curriculum and let it unfold. And then the last piece is a more focus in terms of PD around collaborative problem solving with K through 5, which is essentially equitable facilitation skills, and the 5 practices for 6 through 8, which is a similar structure to support teachers on how to facilitate conversations with students so that students come away with stronger learning and sort of long-lasting learning. So that's that. So I'd love to hear questions or comments.
Thanks, Jesse.
Thank you, Jesse. I have a question. Thank you. This is amazing. I like this is more equitable the way I see mathematics, should be for everyone. So before we do the implementation, did we get any pushback from different teachers? Because, they used to teach a different ways. And then we brought the IM to them. So when I see now the feedback more in the positive sense, so I just want to see how the transition went between, doing what I used to do and now moving to the new implementation and then what we are right now. Mm-hmm. Well, how did you get a sense of their reaction, before and the challenge that they have?
I think I'll talk to the middle school implementation because that's been sort of farther along. And I actually was the math coach in the middle school when we first started using IM, so I was really close to that work. And I would say a lot of folks did that pre-teaching that I talked about, and they were nervous about, having what at first they thought was a scripted curriculum. Mm-hmm. They felt like it took away some of their, autonomy. But so that was the first thing. And then I think what they have found is that it actually freed them up to do more of the actual teaching because they knew they had high quality materials to work with. So that was one of the sort of transformations I saw with teachers, sort of really enjoying using a curriculum that they could trust, and then sort of making the creativity came with the facilitation, with the implementation of it. And then the other piece that Malia mentioned was just about being like, this is too hard for our students. I remember one 8th grade teacher who said that to me at the beginning, and then she got to the unit test and all the students did so well in it. And she just was through the moon. She was like, I didn't think they could do this. And they did it. And so I feel like we've heard that echo again and again, which is really great.
Yeah, and this is so amazing. You want to say something?
I just wanted to add from the elementary schools, like Jessie mentioned, we're not as far along in the implementation, but I do feel like this is where we entered at different places for middle and elementary because of different contexts. But we, at the elementary level, we already had curriculum. And so our strategy was to begin by really building capacity and understanding around what the current research and evidence says about A, great math teaching and learning, and B, how to do that with equity at the center. And so we hired Tracy to work, and we got the math coaches through Title and did we did a couple years of work to grow their capacity. And then they did a ton of PD in the buildings to start to practice the routines and things like that. So by the time we started to do the sort of phased implementation, teachers had already come to their own conclusion that the materials they had did not line up with what they were learning about best practice in math. And so that became, so then there was more interest in I'm doing extra work to try to piecemeal this together. And then I think the other thing is it was nice because there we did that alpha, beta, full. So the early adopters that were bought in got to do it, try it, and then sort of speak to their peers about their experience. And people that were more skeptical or hesitant had the opportunity to kind of sit back and observe and wait to see how it went.
Okay, yeah. Thank you so much. This is the most outcomes that I can think about it when we invested for the core instruction a couple of years ago, when we voted. So because I was when I cast my vote for that budget, I knew then to coach the coaches is going to be a game changer for the mathematics. I mean, and I think that's exactly what the community needs when we're going with the new investment. Those kind of outcomes, to see the value long way, then is really impacting each of us as students. So we're changing the narrative, we're changing the language, we're changing how we give more empowerment to those that amazing mathematics to our kids. So this is the most our core instructions investment. Thank you so much. This is I'm so glad. Yeah.
I have a couple questions. Member Rodriguez, are you there? Do you have questions or comments first?
I'm here. My connection is really bad. That's why I'm off camera. I saw just really happy to to hear the reflection from the teachers and the principals. The clip from the principals was great. Just want to Ms. Bondo's question, and I think we discussed it at the beginning as well. There was also a little bit of hesitation, if you remember, as we were discussing reopening and the budget, about implementing this year, and that was also it's brought up to the board. So we did hear some of that as part of the reopening dialogue. Yeah, I'm floored by how quickly people buy into it, because I guess they're seeing the results right away. I love that. It's exciting. It's really exciting stuff.
Yeah, very exciting. I know this comes on the backs of lots of hard work and let's call it change management. So thank you for that. I have a couple of clarifying questions. One, when you talked about the survey responses, what percent of the total possible entries was the 129 entries, and how does that compare to usual survey returns? Do you know?
I would have to get back to you about the total number of teachers that teach math, and I will do that. But I would say, so I guess I can't answer the second question unless I have the total amount. Okay.
It just helped me. It's part of my getting grounded across lots of different things. So then with people responses, the math content routines, was that language that was being used previous to IM? Is that something people would know that they were doing? Or is that more like you're tracking, we're now talking about it, do you recognize it even if we give you a definition and now we're seeing growth of it? Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah. What's interesting about the survey is it's actually a self-report change in, so they only answered it at the end of the school year, and they said, before I didn't do this and now I am doing this. And so it really is, because oftentimes when you ask people, not teachers, but anybody, are you doing this right now? People will say yes. But what Shelby said is that if you ask them at the end of something, then they can reflect back and say, oh, no, I actually wasn't doing this before and now I am. So that's what the design of the survey is about. And so they now know what it is and they can say, I wasn't doing this before, if that makes sense.
That does make sense, and it helps with my, I think, last question. I was wondering if you had...
Can I say one little teeny thing on that, Adam? Because I remember I probed on that with Shelby, the research lead. And the one other thing she did say is that she was struck in Portland by the way teachers rated there, that usually she sees teachers, even in that survey design, rate themselves higher. I think I was already doing this. So she was like, wow, she was just commenting to us that it was interesting to see the way our teachers self-evaluated themselves in terms of that change in practice, because she says oftentimes there's a little bit of an inflated sense in the beginning. And so it was, from her perspective, cool to see that our teachers seem to be sort of, presumably more honest about that, but of course it's all self-report. So I don't know. But anyway, I just wanted to add that because we actually had a conversation about that point because I found it intriguing.
Great. Yeah, at least more earnest, if not more honest, right?
There you go.
So I was wondering if you could track one for one what the change was. So I understand the survey design better, that it does give you that. So I'm curious to what Member Bondo was talking about earlier in terms of the inconsistency of experience that could be had. Is there a plan for further support for folks that weren't in that, big swing of change that was in the side of those numbers that we would still want to change? Does that make sense?
Yeah. I could talk about sort of our professional development plans for next year, if that's helpful. And then also support, sort of ongoing learning for coaches. So for all teachers, being EL teachers, special educators, grade level teachers, ed techs, we're doing a PD that's school-based next year, but it's really, we're doing a train the trainer model where IM is going to train our coaches, and then the coaches are going to deliver PD in pairs to schools. And so that's really a way to sort of have consistency in terms of professional development across the system, specifically around equitable facilitation. So how do you ensure that all students have access to this curriculum? And I would say, within that PD, it'll provide some more skills for teachers. And in my experience, when teachers feel confident with using a curriculum and they see outcomes, then they're often more bought in. So that's one piece of it. And then I would say the coach, we've had math coaches, who are phenomenal. I mean, everybody talks about how amazing our math coaches are. And, deepening their practice next year in terms of coaching all teachers through observation and debrief through math labs, sort of like using those tools that Shelby mentioned that are really targeted towards the specific areas of the curriculum and what it means to implement it with fidelity. With integrity is the word that we all use, just much more true to form than fidelity. So that's some of the plans for next year. I don't know if that answered your question, but
yeah, that's helpful. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thanks for the good news.
So that was, and I'm looking at our time. I know I had like a whole other third section, but unless there's anything else, I think we're just psyched to share that with you all and to celebrate the progress and to keep you all informed, because I know you hear different perspectives. Yeah. Thanks, Jesse, for that piece. Okay, then we have 15 minutes. I think we might not get into a deep discussion, but at least I'd love to preview a little bit of this work if that feels okay to you all. So I'm going to go back to sharing my screen. Okay. So, I guess, this final piece was just to preview the district teaching and learning priorities for the coming year, by giving you a little bit of the highlights from the research space we're using, kind of stepping you through the draft priorities and strategies and just giving a little bit of space for questions and discussion. So I think this is something, if you're interested, you can absolutely go back and check out. But as a part of the community that we're included in through BAR, we got access to professional development through Attuned Education Partners. And there's been various things, but something that we did participate in and that we've been using is their Learning, Recovery, and Renewal Research Fact Pack. And so this was just one thing that I thought would be helpful to give you all visibility into, and so you can just learn a little bit about who they are and who they partner with. And they lead by talking about their commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion, and anti-racism, just in terms of who they are, what they're about. And so in here, they talked about just some of the, what's come out in terms of the impact of the pandemic. And I don't know, I mean, my intention was not to step you through this, but just to make sure you see what's here. And some of what they're seeing as the opportunity. And they talk about, racial equity concerns are at the front and center, in terms of all the research that they're pulling together around what happened and how we need to be thinking about moving forward. These are the key problems. Sorry, I know you guys can't see this. I'm trying to get Jesse to the 20 strategies. So they talked about, here's their recommendations based on all the research. So they've cataloged the evidence of 5 domains and a framework in terms of kind of thinking through how schools and districts should prioritize, thinking about reopening and their plans and how they set priorities. And so they have this menu of approximately 20 initiatives that, when prioritized to a small number, implemented well, can help drive recovery and renewal. And so, and they sort of contextualize everything in terms of being equity is centered in its approach. So the big areas are under student culture, curriculum instruction and assessment, talent management, family and community partnership, and then the operational components. But if you look back at this and want to kind of dig in, I think in student culture and curriculum instruction assessment and family and community partnership, those recommendations line up very strongly with the plans we've always had that align with the Portland Promise, as well as the draft priorities we had already established for next year based on where we are in our implementation of the promise, as well as based on our reflections and insights given how this year has gone. I think if you look through the 20 initiatives, the one thing that's not currently a part of the work that we're actively engaged in is high dosage tutoring. That's something that we have talked a lot about and might add as a support structure in the future. But we went to a lot of their high dosage tutoring kind of breakout PD as well. And I think ultimately the huge emphasis is around making sure your tier 1 instruction is really high quality in order for all those other things to have an effect. You all might also find it interesting what they shared in terms of certain common approaches that are intentionally not included in their set of recommendations. So they talked about the reduction of class size, adaptive learning programs as a primary strategy, extending the day or year before high quality materials are in place, adopting content neutral approaches to learning acceleration, and identifying power standards. So there's a lot of meat on that bone in terms of what they described there. I think, I'll just give you an example in terms of reduction of class size. That was interesting. A lot of our people keyed in on that because when we talked with schools about this year and sort of what worked, what didn't work, what's worth holding on to, many teachers talked about the small class size as something they really liked and felt made a difference. And so what's interesting here that they speak to is that there is research that says a large reduction in class size can increase student achievement. So their context was that to get to the level that has the actual effect size of changing achievement, you have to lower it so far that for most districts, it's not tenable or feasible in terms of the budget. So therefore, an incremental reduction does not have the same effect, but is still super costly, which is why they wouldn't recommend putting resources there. So it was just interesting to sort of talk through some of those things and challenge some of our assumptions. So that was one piece. And then I also linked to this, some of the additional kind of subcomponents where they went deeper. The Tier 1 curriculum adoption and implementation is one that I think resonated strongly with us in terms of what we're already thinking about and focused on. And so there's just essentially, there's a place I'm going here, so sorry if I'm making you dizzy. But the big headline is that you have to have strong Tier 1 instruction and high quality instructional materials, like as the foundation. And that, so rather than just jump right to which kids are furthest behind, how do we put them into different groups and give them targeted skill-based teaching, it's make sure you have really high quality Tier 1 instruction for all kids to access. And then you can start to look at, are there additional things you need to support or put around that? Oopsie, I was talking and then I scrolled right past what I wanted to share. I guess I won't do that right now because I'm just trying to be quick. So those were, you can pop into those if you're interested. I think the final thing I wanted to share is Cindy's op-ed from the Press Herald, because I feel like what I just highlighted for you all is a synthesis of research with some concrete recommendations that, if you look more closely at it, are, very consistent with a lot of the work that we're prioritizing. But what Cindy's piece does is speaks to the kind of more of the tone and the mindset we have around this. This past school year was not a loss. It was lived beautifully. And so she speaks, I think, very beautifully to what this experience was and all that we gained and not just lost. And so I think we've had conversations about that and the way we want to orient toward bringing students back, welcoming our whole community back to schools in the fall, and how we want to kind of think about our approach where we're not just like urgently trying to like figure out which kids are behind and focus on power standards, but really instead continue to go really deep into a rich and meaningful core instructional experience that includes all kids and holds all kids to high expectations while tending to the social emotional and mental health needs of people across the system. So I can share with you kind of where the draft priorities are at. Should I go right into that, or do you want me to pause for any questions on that very, very cursory overview of some of the research behind? I will just share, I think, for Mickey and Roberto, that Adam had asked me directly when I said we were going to preview these priorities per our plan for this last curriculum committee meeting, that, you wanted to know, well, how are we thinking about this whole conversation we've had about, quote, learning loss and mitigating gaps and all that. So that's where I was trying to quickly add in some of the context, because of course that's been a deep and ongoing conversation, but I realized that didn't necessarily give it sufficient time. But do you want to ask or just pause there, Adam, or do you want to just roll right into these?
I'm okay to roll.
Okay. So let me step you through these. You're seeing actually a more recent iteration than our admin team has seen, just based on some work this morning. But I should say that every year, using the Portland Promise, we reflect on sort of how far did we get this year and what are the next big priorities for the following year. And we do that at the district level. And then we use those priorities to help inform what we call school success plans, where they set their priorities, goals, and strategies. So this is a typical kind of process we use. And so this is this year's proposed annual priorities that are not just about this year. They're kind of the next big moves we're making and the sort of longer term trajectory that we're on. So we have 4 big priorities, and I'm just going to highlight the first 3 today because they're the teaching and learning focused areas. So first is strengthening Tier 1 instruction, focusing on quality, access, and high expectations for all kids, aligned to our achievement and equity goal. The second is safe and equitable schools where kids have a sense of belonging and a connection. That's aligned with our whole student and equity goal. And then the third priority is about a professional learning culture, where we have a sense of collective efficacy, and that's our people and equity goal. One thing you'll notice is that when we designed the Portland Promise, we intentionally made equity its own goal, even though we knew that we wanted it to cut across and sort of be integrated into everything. But we felt at the time we needed to sort of pull it out and call it out to give it enough attention and focus. And this year we feel like we're ready to make a meaningful transition to sort of naming where equity is embedded in core instruction and culture in schools and our professional culture, rather than having sort of a separate equity specific priority. I've shared this before, it may or may not be familiar, but for every priority area, we have a theory of action. So in terms of Tier 1 instruction, our theory of action is that if all students get exposed to relevant and engaging grade level learning with appropriate supports and scaffolds, they're more likely to master grade level content. And you can kind of read the end of that theory of action, but that's consistent with what we've been saying and focused on. So we have 3 strategies that we're really focused on this year. The first is about instructional materials. The second is around sort of educator competencies as it pertains to equitable instructional practices. And the third is about disrupting and replacing structures that are barriers to equitable opportunities for all students. And so in terms of like the specifics of what that means, for instructional materials, it's the deepening of the implementation of IM as well as phonics. It's the continued design and initial launch of social studies and science. And it's beginning to grow a health education progression. We've continue to have, and I think it's been heightened, this sense of need around, and it's not health per se. There's many topics that fit into this general health umbrella. But I think historically we've had a lot of need for better consent education. And I think right now there's a lot of feedback we're getting around identity and a lot of pushback from families that our teachers and leaders are needing to navigate. And it's just like, once again, helping to illuminate the fact that we need to have a clear approach to curriculum that teachers can understand and can be more consistent for all kids. And then so those are the sort of instructional material focus areas this year. The competency focus is around equitable facilitation in math. You heard Jesse speak to that, as well as content-based literacy and equitable instructional practices in literacy. And then the structures are really about reducing pullout and tracking. And in order to do that, increasing collaboration and co-planning between general ed and content teachers and special ed and ELL teachers. And then also increasing the diversity and sort of the voices that we're really hearing from, and focusing on traditionally underrepresented parents to help inform and shape the work we're doing around core instruction. So that's priority one of the three I'm going to talk through. Should I keep rolling? I feel like I should, and then just grab your questions, because otherwise we'll definitely talk about this till more than our time is up. So safe and welcoming schools. This is the behavioral health continuum priority we've had for the past couple of years. This is about, our theory here is that if we prioritize authentic relationships at the individual level, equitable and transparent systems at the school level, and meaningful supports and structures at the district level, and deep listening to what our students and families tell us they experience and need, then we'll have a system where all students feel valued, seen, and can thrive. So the big strategies are about collective mindsets and skills to deepen relationships and ensure a sense of belonging, both in class and in the school community. We talked about there's intentionality behind class and the community, because it's generally at school, but it's also in class. It's this idea that we hear kids say, I went into an AP class and I felt like I didn't belong, or I felt like people didn't think I belonged. So it's really like all kids feel welcome in rigorous and engaging classes and in the building at large and in the school community. And the second strategy is developing structures that support the development of meaningful connection for students. So the concretes here are on the mindsets and skills, the deepening of the Portland Promise Point person work that came out of this past year, as well as building skill and mindset around restorative practices and de-escalation. And then the structures work is continuing the PBIS work with a focus on the school success teams and data use, implementation of harassment and discrimination policy, and strengthening transitions through district-wide systems and structures that really center students. And then this is the third final one, professional learning culture. I have to say our theory of action is a bit of a mouthful. We don't love it. So, but you can get the spirit is that we're focusing on shared vision for instruction, deepening our equity literacy, having embedded professional development that's aligned to our materials and priorities, focusing on teacher leadership and collaboration, and ultimately driving toward a culture where people trust each other and welcome feedback to grow professionally in service of our kids and families. So 3 strategies here. The first is around, and I think people here, I'm thinking Member Bondo in particular, over time with your feedback, will appreciate strengthening the district's data systems and capacity, deepening our skill as equity-oriented instructional leaders, and establishing consistent structures for school improvement. And so the concretes here are the pre-K through 12 assessment strategy we've kind of previewed is happening with you all, and the portrait of a graduate work that's not just at the high school, but also at the 8th and 5th grade level. The skill development is focused on being able to better recognize and respond to inequities in our practices and systems, such as by integrating equity literacy into eval systems, as well as building capacity around instructional coaching. And then the structures work is around really quality professional learning systems in the buildings that align with priorities, and then implementation of the recommendations from the Educators of Color report. There's even more detail under many of these, but that's a little too much detail probably for you guys right now. So, but just so you know. So I'm going to stop share. So in 30 seconds, what do you think? I don't know. I mean, I'm fine to go a little bit over. I do have the family who said they'd wait for the meal for me, so I can't be too far over, but I'm happy to stay for a few minutes to answer some questions. Yeah.
We have a nice routine of ending on time. I like our routine. I feel like this would, perhaps we just need to put this at the front of our agendas coming back in August. But if there's anything hot for Member Bondo and Rodriguez, please ask or comment, and then I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
I don't have any comment. I really agree Chair, what you just mentioned, because it's a lot to absorb. So I think we just need to read a little more deeper and then, get ready for August. So I think I'm okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, same. And, I'm okay with finishing on time and then putting that at the beginning of our next meeting, and then taking the time with it.
One just quick thing. I know I'm not. You all are getting the preview because there is such a, the orientation around the teaching and learning work, and Adam, because of what we had in our long-term plan, it felt like the right piece of, like the right artifact to look at to be able to have the conversation. But this is something Javier will want to share with the full board. And he'll also, of course, include the fourth priority, which is operations focused. So I just wanted to acknowledge that too, that I felt like having you all get a little bit of time with this, because we have these conversations about core instruction and the culture and the professional learning culture would be useful. But just so you know, that I think he will want to share this with everybody on the board as well.
That sounds good. And Malia, when you and I do some of our planning, we can coordinate, see if it makes sense to revisit here or leave that to the full board. Okay. So thank you all for a great meeting. We didn't get through all of it in the depth that I know that we could. And I know not only is there dinner waiting, but hopefully soon there'll be fantastic election results waiting for us too. So our next meeting is August 10th at 6 p.m. as it stands now, and as Malia stated, she and I will do some planning and socialize that with you for further refinement at that time. At this point, may I have a motion to adjourn? So moved by Member Rodriguez and a second by Member Blunt. Thank you. Thank you both. Thank you, Malia. Thank you, Josie. Thank you, Lindsay. Have a wonderful evening.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great night.